Welcome back to the PrideCo podcast. In our first episode, we sat down with Huy Do and talked about how PrideCo got its start, from the very first deals to how the family office was built. And today I want to tell the other side of that story. Joining me today is Matt Lyon, one of the 3 shareholders here at PrideCo, and a member of the Lyon family whose vision helped lay the foundation for everything that's been built. Today, we're going to talk about where that vision came from, some stories from the early days, and what continues to make PrideCo different. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm excited to kick this off.
Thanks for inviting me on, Gary. Really appreciate it.
Tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you were doing before PrideCo.
Okay, so first of all, just some basics. I grew up in Minnesota. Education-wise, I studied engineering, product design, and business. Worked in investment banking. Actually, my second job was for a family office, doing private equity activity for them before I went back to grad school. So kind of got my first exposure to a private office before I even had an idea that I'd be associated. The big thing to understand is that in 2001, I started a company called HydraPak. So this was my big step out in entrepreneurialism. At that time, my father was still running his main company, Colder Products, up in Minnesota. So I started the business. First few years are rocky, as they said can be. Quite involved in keeping the business afloat. HydraPak, by the way, we do hydration products for endurance sports. Think like hiking, biking, cycling, things like backpack reservoirs, vest flasks, bike water bottles. 2005 came along, and that was the year that my father sold Colder Products. Kind of major change for him after starting a business from scratch,
Right.
using his 401k funds, figuring out how to start a business. 30 years later, sells out to Dover Corporation, has a big pile of cash. That was kind of the time frame when he then turned to me in 2006 and started asking for me to get involved.
Before PrideCo existed, what was your family's vision? I mean, did you ever think it would become part of the lending business?
Boy, I don't think there was ever a thought on that front. Father came from humble roots. He was working as a plant manager and got moved around every year by these corporations. And he finally quit and said, I just can't move every year. I just got to do my own business so that I can live with my family, and took his savings and started it. It was not I'm going to get rich kind of a thing. It was like a different set of desires and just an interest in business. But his motivation was very much to provide for his family. He didn't think a lot about what would happen. We certainly didn't talk about it. Some of those lessons in entrepreneurship were how to get your kids to work instead of hiring people.
Yeah.
And but just like, how to live modestly and to reinvest the money in the business for growth over time, and to kind of delay that gratification point to down the road, kind of taking advantage of compound growth as you go. I don't think he ever planned on having a pot of money. And so I don't think there was a vision for what happened. I would say he was never a big investor, did not trust the Wall Street types. He didn't even trust the Chicago folks. He worked with a couple local guys, but they would generally lose his money. And so when he ended up with, after a selling company, he partnered with his accountant in Florida to come up with some investments. And so that's kind of his style, personal, close, people that he knows. And this guy's background was that he was an accountant for some very wealthy individuals in Maine, where he had his practice before he moved down to Florida. And one of the guys, successful, wealthy, and his investment practice was to lend money to people in Maine, to individuals, so people that would need it. And he always loaned money against their homes. And so this kind of was one of the things that this accountant passed along is, hey, there's a good business in private lending. That it doesn't always have to be big businesses. This is a safe and potentially high earning activity. And it was his initiative that really got us involved in private lending to start. And then it was just the match between kind of what we were looking for from a family as far as protection of principal and reliable income stream, good returns, that, that it was a positive match. And so over the years, we migrated more and more towards just the private lending platform.
I had no idea about that part of the story.
A lot of that actually predates we as well. So I know we say family office. I'm hesitant to call it a family office because that implies a lot of things nowadays. And I'm like,
Mm.
boy, this is more just our family looking after our own interests and working with individuals that we want.
That is a great segue to the next step. You said some of that was before even we and Brandon came on board. So how did we and Brandon come into the picture, and what stood out about them that made you want to hire them?
So when we started, Brandon was already working for me. Brandon was the controller at HydraPak. I was aware that he was doing some investing advice for his family and for some friends of the family, and I think some other folks from Minneapolis. But he was working for me in Oakland. And I just approached him and said, my father's looking for some advice. I'm trying to figure out how to set up an operation to help him out here. I said, what would you think about going in with me together? Because I was quite honestly had my hands full running this business each day. So he was very interested in it. I think, investing has been a long-term interest of his.
Okay.
We started working with the accountant and started to try to take a look at what was going on. So Brandon didn't have to interview for the position. He was there
Nice.
and was willing, and that's what it took. And he was a smart enough guy that I hired him for HydraPak. And so after the sale, let's just say there was a first slew of investments, and it was kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? And so it was enough that my father asked us to get involved. And so we took a look. So Brandon and I were looking at it in 2006. One of the early loans we made was actually to Meguiar's, who does the high-end wax for cars.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it was Southern California firm, and it was against receivables. So it was an asset-based loan. Pretty short term, pretty high interest rate. Good deal for us. They paid off just fine.
Good
But I
deal.
think that it kind of established this connection. So this was a connection that the accountant in Naples had with some folks in Orange. And so that led then, I think, to some other loans in Orange County. And there was a financier that we were working with who said he had lots of deals, lots of opportunities. We started looking at some of these deals, investing in a few of them. And he had a guy working for him who was finishing up his grad degree, who was working as an analyst, and this was Huy Do. And so we got to know him as the analyst on these deals. And I remember my dad saying to me, wow, that kid's sharp. And he said, you should really talk to him about, see if he wants to work with us. And I was like,
Right.
oh, okay, I decide who gets to hire you. and and so we got to know Huy a little bit more, and just very impressed with his skills and with his integrity. And then at that time, we were starting to transition from working with this financier to doing some work, managing some of these deals ourselves. So we asked him to work directly with us, and that then turned into him being our point person for the Southern California loans. The two guys at that point, Brandon in Northern California, we in Southern California, and then we had the accountant with some back office people in Naples.
Got it. So when the three of you came together, I mean, did you have any idea that PrideCo would become what it is today, or were you just basically trying to figure it out one deal at a time?
We probably had about a year of let's go find some good deals, let's invest.
Okay.
And then the Great Recession hit. And
yeah, I was going to talk about that.
So there was a time period where we raised some money. We said, let's turn this into something. We had a small fund going. We were looking for some deals. We were working with some folks in Florida and Minnesota and Connecticut, kind of some hedge fund folks. And then just, man, the music stopped. And that was a big change because we had a number of private investments that just stopped paying, stopped responding. And, it's like, okay, it's time to go out and save the war chest. We got to go get these assets back.
Right.
And so the entire business changed from one of investment to one of recovery, and including lawyers and all sorts of, you know, really unpleasant stuff. And then at the same time, we had to figure out how to keep the cash flow going for the families. And so looking for new investments that would provide cash flow in this really adverse time period for investing. So I was very committed as a family member to making it go, but as also where I had these, two younger guys working for me who had talent, and they could leave any day and go do something else. And so we started talking about how do we, make this more of a vehicle for the employees as a family office for one family. When the family members die, what happens, right? It's like, oh,
Right.
your job's over. Like, that's not an exciting job. And,
Right.
one that gets less interesting every year when folks get older. So we really wanted to make it a basis for this as a business in its own, which would be interesting for the people working in the business and would satisfy the needs of the family. And so that was really, it was quite intentional as we transitioned from that idea of just a family office, if you think of like the concierge aspects, whatever, to trying to create the more of the structures of an ongoing business that people could invest their time in and grow. And from my perspective, in a way that wasn't just growth based upon my family writing checks. It was based upon, people generating value themselves. When we started moving that direction, and actually when we formed the partnership, when I brought Brandon and Huy as investors,
Okay.
we had a pretty solid idea that this is where we wanted to go, to turn this into a great standalone company that served investors like the Lyon family very well.
You've already touched on it. Wasn't always real estate related. Looking back, what's one story that always makes you laugh?
One that I really like that I kind of pull out every once in a while, and it's a good example of why we're in lending, was okay, so this is early days. We're down in Naples, have some loans to some people, and have done some investing with people there in the Naples area through this accountant. Recessions happen. So one of the guy who always had like this open shirt, wore this gold chain, liked to
Yes.
meet at Shula's. Like Shula was the hot place in Naples, right? And so it became clear that he was going to jail. So
Ah,
he
okay.
had some of his investor friends ran afoul of the FBI. He was part of that, not
Oh, wow. Shady.
necessarily the most honest guy.
Right.
And turns out we had a loan to him secured by his house.
Okay.
But it was like a third position, right? There was supposed to be a lot of like business there, a lot of trust, whatever. And this was just kind of like this third position loan.
Right.
Well, he was going to jail. The way things work in Florida is you can homestead one property that they can't take away from you in bankruptcy or anything like that. So he wanted to own this house free and clear so that he was going to be in jail and they wouldn't be able to take it away from him. They could take everything else, but they wouldn't be able to take this house.
Right.
Well, we had this loan. And I'm like, okay, pay us back. And
Right.
then we're good. We didn't want to pay us back. We were a third. He thought we should take a big discount,
Right.
if anything. And I was like, no, you pay us back at home. So we ended up getting together face to face in Naples. And it was early days. Brandon, we, and myself, probably one of the first times the three of us are together.
Okay.
We're in a room, and this guy walks in with his business colleague, and we all sit down, and they start threatening us. You're not going to get any money back. It's going to go to the first. They're going to take it. You're never going to see anything. You'll be, and I'm just like, yeah, well, we've got our position. Once you pay us back, we'll release the lien. And it got pretty confrontational and the whole thing. And then finally, I just at the end, I said, like, this is the way it's going to work. Either you're going to end up with the house or I'm going to end up with the house.
Right.
And it's up to you. And so they got up and left. And we were all like, whoo, like,
I can see we and Brandon just kind of like behind you, like trying to look all tough.
Yes, that's very accurate. Well, a couple weeks later, didn't hear a word personally about him, but he reached out and said, "Okay, where can I send the check?" To our back office, sent the check over, paid off the loan in full. We released the lien, and he got to go to jail with his house free and clear. A great lesson, not only like in the power of real estate liens,
Right.
but also a great lesson that when borrowers get their back up against the wall, they will do anything they can to get out of it. That like borrowing is like this isn't just nice people giving you their money back. Like if
Right.
somebody's got some, you're their last priority,
Correct.
and you have to make yourself their top priority. Otherwise, you're not going to get out of a hard position. So you got to have real leverage to use to be able to make that happen.
Right.
So I laugh at it now just because it was early days, but it's also like, walked away with it and went, oh, okay. I just learned something really important there.
Did you ever do another loan in the third position since then?
I don't think so. Actually,
Yeah.
we had another loan in a third position, Rancho Santa Fe,
Mm,
but also the entire lending environment changed. That suddenly people just weren't making loans. So you could get a first position on anything, and you could get, we were getting 12 and 4 when it was just like great rates at the time for really low risk loans, all first positions. And we just said, okay, this is the business. And we really haven't looked back.
So you touched also a little bit earlier on the housing crisis, and I was going to ask you through these lessons that you're learning, what would you attribute to the biggest reason PrideCo has been successful over the years, given that you went through the housing crisis and then, we've had the roller coaster of rate changes, we had COVID. I think that that's something that I personally believe sets us apart from especially where we've seen what's changed in the marketplace. People jumping all over the place, leaving the industry, new shops coming in. So what do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think you're right. The starting off in that time frame, the lesson was very much be humble and stay focused.
Mm,
Right? There was a lot of ways to get screwed, a lot of ways to mess up.
right.
Um, and so I think what we said a lot internally was don't chase the shiny object. We were kind of slow growth, first positions, like let's run this as a business. Other people came in, it was like, oh, we can be a broker, we can make our money and have all our risk off the table within a week. We're like, no, this is our money. We want to see it through. We want to get it back. We made sure we weren't going to be in broker positions. Didn't feel like that was alignment. And we saw a lot of folks hire a lot, shoot up, kind of leverage themselves and blow up, which is hard when you're watching somebody who's really successful and you're like, wow, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And then, 9 months later, it's like, oh, they're gone. Uh, it's like, it's funny, like how, a little bit of persistence, patience, sees you through that. And I think the other side that is a big difference maker is just that, and I think you've seen this a lot, that we look at this as just as a business. Integrity is important, service is important, value is important. It's just not low price, quick turn. We don't incentivize our employees to do things short term. We try to
Right.
hire long term focused people. We try to treat them well, have them look at this as a career choice, not as a job. And I think a lot of people get into finance for different reasons, for making money quick.
Yep.
And they'll all talk about investments, whatnot, but their main motivation is to make a lot of money for themselves. And you can never forget that when you talk, sit across the table from somebody. It's like, what is your main motivation?
Right.
And I always thought that that's why the family office thing made a difference for people, is that our main motivation was, again, capital preservation and reliable income for their family. And then using our understanding of business on how to make a solid business, treat people well, and that we're trying to create a great vehicle for the people, the employees, but it's within that perspective, and that we do treat every loan like it's our own money, because oftentimes it is.
Which leads me to my next question for you is personally, what do you think makes PrideCo different from most lenders that are out there today?
Hmm. Biggest thing I learned, in the recession and going through, we had a number of different types of deals, and people show you, here's the investment, here's the whatever. And the one thing that's not on there, but is the most important thing, is what's the motivation of the person you're dealing with? Like, what really is their motivation? Why
Mm,
are they doing this? What do they get out of it? Where are they going? Because if a deal all works out, everyone's happy. But not every deal does. As a matter of
right.
fact, a lot of them don't. And suddenly it's like, I've got a problem. Are you going to help? And I think that our background from business has taught us that repeat relationships are important. Treating people right is important. Providing a complete offering and service is important. And when we enter into these transactions, again, like I know that just the LTV is not going to be the biggest determinant of whether we're going to get repaid or not. It's the
Hmm.
character of the person that we're working with.
Right.
And so I feel like the same way, if somebody comes and judges us just based on whether we have the best rate that day, is it 7.99% or whatever? I don't know if they're looking at the right thing. Because if they're going to, be borrowing a whole bunch of money, what happens? How much accommodation, how much work is there? How much knowledge is there to bring to the table when something can go wrong or something's become difficult?
Yeah.
And I always think that that's where we shine. We are knowledgeable. We get to know our borrowers. We track the relationships all the way through. We're very motivated to help the repayment. People that work with us feel that. And too often, I think somebody can look at the arithmetic and say, here's something, a deal I'll go for, but it's with a big bank that is not going to be your friend if things get hard. I would always say, value and not price. You might find the lowest price, but it's not the best value. Value is, are you going to make money at the end of the day? Like, are you going to end up doing well because you're working with someone who's going to be able to help you in all these situations? Or are you only going to be able to make money in the most optimum scenario and you're going to get screwed in others? I would always say that we're the top value lender from that standpoint. Like somebody can make money with us.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that I get when talking to borrowers or even brokers that have brought us deals, they feel that motivation from us for them. A big shout out to, Bergen, who is the backbone of our loan operations. She's really looking out for them and their best interest. She's protecting us, but she's also protecting them at the same time. And you definitely don't get that experience at other places. So yeah, you hit it spot on. I always say, I feel like people feel like they are part of the family once they have worked with us.
We've been fully deployed as a lender for 20 years. We're not a broker that maybe does a few deals, then maybe goes quiet, like very low overhead. We've had employees and we've been fully deployed because that's our job, is to make money for our investors. So
Right.
we've never backed out of the market. And so we've stayed involved, we've stayed active, we've worked through the highs and lows, but been there for the borrowers the whole time.
Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today.
I'm looking forward to another 20 years, Gary.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt.